My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 31 years old. And the strange thing about disrespect is that it doesn't arrive loud enough for you to reject it right away. It doesn't slam doors or raise voices. It slips in quietly, through tone, through timing, through the way someone looks at their phone instead of at you when you're in the middle of telling them something that matters. 3 months ago, I didn't think my relationship was ending. I thought we were just going through something temporary. That's what people tell themselves when the shift is small enough to ignore. My boyfriend, Ethan Cole, and I had been together for a little over 2 years. We met at a friend's birthday party, one of those crowded, loud nights where conversations blur together, but somehow, one person stands out. He stood out, confident, effortless, the kind of man who didn't try to be the center of attention, but always ended up there anyway. And I was the opposite, quieter, observant, the kind of woman who listens more than she speaks. He used to say he liked that about me. "You calm me down," he told me once, half smiling as we sat on his couch, his arm draped lazily across my shoulders. "You make things feel steady." Back then, I believed that was a good thing. That being someone's stability meant you mattered. What I didn't realize was how easy it is to take stability for granted. Ethan worked in marketing. Fast-paced, social, unpredictable. Late nights, client dinners, events that blurred into after-parties. I didn't mind. I trusted him. When he texted, "Out late with coworkers, don't wait up," I'd reply, "Have fun, be safe." I never wanted to be the kind of girlfriend who questioned everything. The insecure one. The difficult one. So I gave him space. And slowly, he started taking more of it than I offered. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with smaller things. Replies that came later than they used to. Conversations that felt shorter. Less curiosity, less warmth. Where he used to ask, "How was your day?" Now it was, "Everything good?" Like checking a box. And if I answered with anything longer than a sentence, I could feel his attention slipping before I even finished. At first, I told myself he was just busy, stressed. People go through phases. Relationships adjust. That's normal. But then, she came back into the picture. His ex-girlfriend. Her name was Lily. High school relationship, years ago. Nothing serious, he said. At least, that's what he told me. The first time he mentioned her again, it sounded harmless. "Guess who I ran into today?" he said casually one evening, scrolling through his phone while I stood at the stove. "Who?" "Lily, at a coffee shop. She's actually not as bad as I remember." I remember pausing, wooden spoon hovering over a pot of boiling pasta. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Light, almost amused. I nodded slowly. "That's good, I guess." And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because after that, she started appearing more often. At first, it was indirect. A name dropped in conversation. Then photos, group settings, work events, random run-ins. Always just close enough to be noticeable, but not enough to call out without sounding paranoid. The first time I mentioned it, I kept my tone neutral. "I've noticed you've been seeing Lily a lot lately." He didn't even look up from his phone. "You're reading too much into it," he said. "We're just friends." Just friends. It's a simple phrase, one people use when they don't want to explain more. I nodded. Dropped it, because I didn't want to be that girlfriend. The one who turned something small into something bigger. But even after that, something shifted. Ethan became sharper, not openly cruel, just less patient, more dismissive. If I asked about his day, sometimes he'd sigh like I was asking for too much. "It was fine, Natalie. You don't have to check in every 5 minutes." I didn't, but I stopped asking. If I sent something thoughtful, a message, a small gesture, he'd leave it unread for hours. And when I brought it up later, he'd shrug. I was busy. Always busy. Always just enough of a reason to make me question whether I was being unreasonable. I started shrinking my expectations without even realizing it, making myself easier to deal with, quieter, less demanding. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like his partner and started feeling like an inconvenience he tolerated. Still, I stayed, because relationships aren't perfect, because people go through things, because I believed that what we had was still there underneath everything else. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit that it wasn't. Then came the wedding, his older sister's wedding. A big one, the kind people plan for months, obsess over details, invite everyone who has ever mattered. Ethan had been helping with preparations. Somewhat. I helped more, running errands, covering last-minute costs when budgets stretched too thin. His parents appreciated it. His mother once took my hand and said, "You're good for him, Natalie. You ground him." I smiled, because that's what I thought I was doing, holding things steady, even as they quietly started to unravel. A week before the wedding, we were at his parents' house for dinner when his sister mentioned something casually. "Oh, by the way, Lily's coming to the wedding." The room didn't go silent, but it shifted, just slightly. Ethan didn't react. He just shrugged. "She's friends with the groom. It's not a big deal." His mother gave him a look, one of those looks that says more than words ever could. But he ignored it. And then he added, almost offhandedly, "Natalie's not going to make it weird. She's not like that." I smiled, because what else was I supposed to do? But inside, something tightened. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Just a quiet, uncomfortable realization that he wasn't considering how I felt, only how I would behave. That night, 2 days before the wedding, he texted me, "Just a heads up, Lily might be there with a date, so don't make things awkward." I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. "No, are you okay with this?" "No, just letting you know." Just instructions. A boundary placed on me. I typed back one word. "Noted." He replied with a thumbs up emoji. And that was it. No follow-up. No conversation. Just silence. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual. Not because I didn't know what to wear, but because I was trying to recognize the woman looking back at me. Calm. Composed. Put together. And somehow, already preparing for something she couldn't quite name yet, I told myself to stay steady, to not overthink, to just get through the day, because it wasn't about me. It was his sister's wedding, and I wasn't going to ruin that. I just didn't realize yet that I wouldn't be the one ruining anything. When I arrived at the venue, everything looked like it belonged in a magazine. Soft white roses lined the entryway. Gold candlelight flickered against glass panels. The late afternoon sun poured through the windows in long, honey-colored streaks that made everyone look softer, happier, more beautiful than they probably felt. For one reckless second, I almost let myself believe the tension between Ethan and me had been exaggerated by my own thoughts. That maybe I had been reading too much into things. That maybe all I needed was one normal day with him to remember why I had stayed. He was standing near the bridal suite when I first saw him, adjusting his tie, laughing at something his cousin said. And he looked good. That was part of the problem with Ethan. Even when he disappointed you, he still looked like the version of himself you first fell for. When he noticed me, his expression brightened just enough to feel familiar. He walked over, kissed my cheek, and let his hand brush my waist. "You look incredible," he said. 3 simple words. And embarrassing as it is to admit now, they worked. For a moment, the ache in my chest loosened. "Thank you," I said. "You clean up well, too." He smiled, easy, charming, like the last few weeks had never happened. Then, just before stepping away, he added, "Try to smile more today, okay? My family loves when you pretend to be social." Pretend. He said it lightly, with that teasing tone people use when they want to insult you and still be able to call it a joke. I gave a small laugh because there were people around. Because his aunt was 2 feet away. Because his sister was already emotional enough without me adding tension to the day. But the word stayed with me. Pretend. As if my effort to show up, to support, to help, to belong in his world had all been performance. The ceremony itself was beautiful. His sister cried the moment she reached the altar. Her groom looked like he could barely believe his luck. Ethan's parents sat beside me, whispering to each other about how perfect everything looked, how proud they were, how quickly time had gone. I smiled at the right moments, clapped when everyone else clapped, held on to the quiet hope that maybe the rest of the night would pass without incident. Once, during the vows, Ethan glanced back from where he stood with the groomsmen. He caught my eye and smiled, and I hate that I smiled back, because that one look was enough to make me wonder if maybe I had imagined the coldness. Maybe I had built the distance bigger in my mind than it was in real life. Maybe the man I loved was still there, just buried under stress and distraction and bad timing. That is the cruel thing about loving someone who hurts you slowly. You become grateful for the smallest signs of tenderness. Dinner went smoothly. For a while, it even felt easy. I talked to his father about work, laughed with 2 of his cousins, helped his mother track down a missing place card and a reluctant flower girl who had decided, very dramatically, that she was done being photographed for the evening. It felt natural, comfortable, more like family than I had felt in weeks. Ethan floated from table to table, social as ever, checking on guests, joking with friends, making himself useful in bursts just visible enough to be praised. Every so often he would pass behind me and let his fingers brush my shoulder. A quick smile, a glance, a tiny gesture that said, "See, we're fine." And maybe that was the most disorienting part, that nothing was wrong, until suddenly everything was. The reception began just after sunset. The lights dimmed, music shifted, champagne glasses lifted, the band started playing something warm and romantic, and the dance floor began to fill in that awkward, charming way it always does at weddings. First the newlyweds, then the bridal party, then the couples who need very little encouragement to be seen in public. Ethan's sister and her husband had their first dance. Then his parents joined. Then the bridesmaids and groomsmen spilled out laughing, pulling others in with them. For a while, I stayed at the table with his parents, sipping a drink and watching the room settle into celebration. And then I saw her, Lily. She entered like she already knew exactly what effect she had on people. Not because she was louder than anyone else, because she didn't need to be. She had that easy, polished kind of beauty that made people look twice. Dark dress, loose hair, a smile that seemed permanently tilted toward amusement, like she was in on a joke nobody else understood. She hugged the groom first, then Ethan's sister, then a few other people, and then Ethan saw her. I knew the exact second it happened. Not because he said anything, because something changed in his face. His attention sharpened. His smile shifted. Not bigger, not brighter, just different. More specific. He made his way toward her without hesitation. I watched them greet each other like people who had unfinished sentences between them. There was nothing openly inappropriate at first. Just conversation. Laughter. The kind of body language that could be dismissed if you wanted badly enough to dismiss it. I told myself to stay calm, to not let my imagination run ahead of reality. He was allowed to talk to someone from his past. That alone meant nothing. But then the minutes stretched, and he didn't come back. I could feel his mother noticing it too, though she said nothing. His father followed the direction of my gaze once, then looked away with a tight jaw. Still, I sat there. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because the alternative was admitting that I was watching my own humiliation arrive in real time. The DJ changed songs. The room energy shifted with it. Something slower now. Not a formal slow dance. Something smoother, heavier, the kind of song that makes people laugh, loosen their shoulders, move closer without pretending they're not. Lily said something to Ethan. He leaned down to hear her. She touched his arm. He smiled. And then he put his hand on her waist. There are moments in life when the world does not explode. It narrows. Everything unnecessary falls away. Sound blurs. The edges of the room soften. And one single point of focus becomes impossible to escape. That was what it felt like watching him touch her. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he would step back. Maybe it was just a joke, a brief dance, a careless moment that would end before it turned into something worse. But it didn't end. It deepened. Lily moved closer. His hand slid lower along her hip. Her body turned toward his, then against it. And suddenly they weren't dancing at a wedding. They were performing something intimate in a room full of witnesses. Not awkwardly, not innocently, deliberately. His ex-girlfriend's back pressed against his chest, his hands on her hips. Her head tipped slightly to the side as if she already knew everyone was watching and had decided she didn't care. Maybe the most painful part was not that it happened. It was that he never looked ashamed. He looked comfortable, like this version of him had been there all along, waiting for the right audience. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until Ethan's father muttered, very quietly, "Jesus Christ." His mother's face had gone pale. One of his aunts turned away so quickly it was almost theatrical. Two bridesmaids exchanged the kind of glance women exchange when they know something is wrong, but don't want to be the first to say it out loud. And still, he kept dancing. I felt hollow. Not fiery, not hysterical, not dramatic. Just hollow, as if all the emotion had drained out too quickly for pain to catch up. Then Ethan looked up, right at me, our eyes locked across the dance floor. And for one tiny, suspended second, I thought maybe that would be enough. That seeing me would wake him up. That embarrassment would hit. That he would step back, put distance between them, come over, explain, apologize, something. Instead, he smirked. Not a full smile, not confusion, a smirk. A small, knowing curve of the mouth that said he understood exactly what I was seeing and did not care. That was the moment something in me went still, completely still. His father turned toward me. Natalie. I stood before he could finish. My chair scraped softly against the floor. No dramatic movement, no raised voice, no tears. I just stood. Because once you realize someone is willing to humiliate you in public, the argument ends inside you before it ever begins out loud. I started walking toward the bar, mostly because it was the closest direction that wasn't toward them. I needed movement, space, air, something to keep me from cracking open in a room full of strangers and relatives and camera phones and curated centerpieces. Behind me, I heard my name. Natalie. I kept walking. Then again louder this time. Natalie, come on. His voice carried that same careless amusement, like I was being difficult over something harmless. I turned halfway, just enough to look back. Ethan had stepped away from Lily, but not far. Not far enough. She was still right there, smiling faintly, one hand still resting on his arm like she had every right to be there. He spread one hand in that infuriating, casual gesture people use when they want to make your pain look unreasonable. "It's just a dance," he said. "Relax." Just a dance. The room did not go silent, but it might as well have, because once those words were spoken, every doubt I had been fighting for weeks finally arranged itself into something clear. It wasn't only what he had done. It was the contempt inside the dismissal. The way he expected me to absorb the disrespect quietly so he wouldn't have to feel inconvenient. The way he made me responsible for not reacting, instead of himself for causing it. His mother started toward him, her expression tight with fury and embarrassment. His sister looked stunned. Someone near the DJ booth pretended very hard to be occupied with their drink. I stared at Ethan for maybe 2 seconds longer than necessary. Long enough to understand that this was not confusion, not drunken stupidity, not a misunderstanding. This was choice. And I was done begging reality to be kinder than it was. So I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, because he didn't deserve the effort it would take to say it. I turned around, walked past the bar, past the dessert table, past the layered wedding cake his sister had spent 3 weekends choosing, and out through the side exit into the cold night air. No one stopped me. Or maybe someone called after me, and I didn't hear it. The air outside hit me like a slap. Sharp, clean, immediate. Inside, music kept playing. Inside, people were still dancing and explaining and pretending and absorbing the secondhand embarrassment of a man who had mistaken cruelty for charisma. But outside, everything was honest. I reached my car with shaking hands. Not sobbing. Not broken. Just shaking. That strange physical reaction your body has when your mind has accepted something your heart hasn't fully caught up to yet. I sat behind the wheel for a moment without starting the engine. My phone lit up almost immediately. "Ethan, where did you go?" Then another. "Ethan, seriously?" Then another. "Ethan, you're being dramatic." And then, a minute later, "Ethan, it was literally a dance. Everyone saw it. Stop making it weird." I stared at that message until I laughed. A bitter, quiet laugh. Because there it was. The full shape of it. Not apology. Not accountability. Just irritation that I had refused to stand there and let him rewrite what happened while it was still happening. I turned my phone face down, started the car, and drove home in complete silence. The whole way back, I kept hearing the same words in my head. Just a dance. Relax. But the truth was, it was never just the dance. It was every small dismissal before it. Every minimized feeling. Every time I made myself smaller to make room for his comfort. The dance was only the first moment he did it so publicly that I could no longer pretend it was private confusion. When I got home, I walked into the apartment we had shared and stood in the dark entryway without turning on the lights. It felt different already. Not emptier. Clearer. As if the illusion had moved out before either of us did. I took off my shoes, set my keys down, looked around at the space we had built together. And for the first time in a long time, I did not wonder how to fix us. I wondered how fast I could be free. I didn't cry that night. That was the part people never understood when I told the story later. They expected tears, anger, some kind of emotional explosion. But what I felt instead was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something breaks so completely, there's nothing left to argue with. I turned my phone off before I went to bed. Not to punish Ethan, just because I didn't want to hear him try to explain something I had already seen clearly with my own eyes. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds like any other day. Normal. Almost offensively normal. For a few seconds, lying there in that half-awake state, I almost forgot. Then it came back. Not as pain. As certainty. I reached for my phone and turned it on. It lit up instantly. Missed calls. Dozens of messages. Most of them from Ethan. A few from his mother. One from his sister. I stared at the screen for a moment before opening the first one. Ethan. Natalie, where did you go? Ethan. You seriously left? Ethan. Everyone noticed. You made it weird. I almost smiled at that. Made it weird. As if I had been the one dancing. As if I had been the one putting on a performance in front of his entire family. The next messages came fast, layered over each other like someone trying different versions of the same excuse. Ethan. It was just a dance. Ethan. You're overreacting. Ethan. Lily means nothing. Ethan. You embarrassed me by leaving like that. There it was. The shift. From dismissal to blame. I scrolled further. Ethan. We need to fix this before people start talking. That one made me pause. Not because it hurt. Because it clarified everything. This wasn't about us. It wasn't about what he did. It was about how it looked. About control. About narrative. I locked my phone and set it down. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel like I needed to explain myself. I didn't feel like I needed to defend my reaction. I just knew. Around mid-morning, my phone rang again. Ethan's mother. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Natalie, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice carrying a tired warmth. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said. There was a small pause. "I'm so sorry about last night," she continued. "Ethan said there was a misunderstanding." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, staring out at nothing. "No," I said calmly. "There wasn't." Another pause. Longer this time. "I told him it was inappropriate," she admitted quietly. "He doesn't seem to understand the severity of it." "I noticed," I said. She sighed softly. "You didn't deserve that," she added. "Not in front of everyone. Not at his sister's wedding." That was the first time someone said it out loud. Not minimized. Not softened. Just true. "Thank you," I said. We spoke for another minute or two. Nothing dramatic. No emotional unpacking. Just an acknowledgement that something had happened and that it mattered. After I hung up, I stood there for a while, letting the silence settle again. Then I started moving. Not impulsively. Not angrily. Methodically. I found boxes. Pulled out drawers. Folded clothes. Separated what was mine from what wasn't. Not everything. Just enough. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew this wasn't a conversation I needed to have. This was a decision I had already made. By the afternoon, my apartment looked different. Not empty. Organized. Intentional. Like a space that no longer had to accommodate uncertainty. Ethan showed up around 3. I knew it was him before I even looked. The knock wasn't hesitant. It was sharp. Impatient. Demanding. "Natalie," he called through the door. "I know you're home." I didn't move. Didn't respond. "Natalie, come on," he said louder now. "This is ridiculous." I walked to the window instead, just enough to see him without being seen. He looked irritated, not remorseful, not shaken, just annoyed that things weren't going the way he expected. His tie was gone, shirt half unbuttoned, sunglasses pushed up into his hair. He ran a hand through it, pacing slightly on the porch. "Are you seriously ignoring me?" he called. "Over this?" "Over this." I almost laughed again. "It was one stupid dance," he continued. "Everyone was drinking. You're acting like I cheated on you in the middle of the reception." His voice cracked slightly at the end. Not from emotion, from losing control of the narrative. I stayed silent, because engaging with someone like that only gives them room to reshape the story. After a few more minutes of knocking, pacing, and increasingly frustrated attempts to get a reaction, he exhaled sharply. "Fine," he muttered. "Be like that." Then he left. Just like that. No apology. No reflection. Just inconvenience. That was when I knew I had made the right decision. Not because of what he had done, because of what he refused to understand afterward. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. They changed tone almost predictably. First came justification. "Ethan, you're blowing this out of proportion." "Ethan, you know how weddings are." "Ethan, it didn't mean anything." Then came deflection. "Ethan, you've been distant for weeks too." "Ethan, don't act like you're perfect." "Ethan, you pushed me away." Then came anger. "Ethan, wow, so you're just ghosting me now?" "Ethan, real mature, Natalie." "Ethan, you'll regret this." And finally, the shift, the one that always comes when control starts slipping. "Ethan, can we just talk?" "Ethan, I miss you." "Ethan, we're good together. You know that." I didn't respond to any of them. Not once. Not because I didn't have words. Because I no longer needed him to hear them. A week later, I heard from one of his cousins. Apparently, the wedding video had been uploaded online. The full version. Unedited. And somewhere around the reception, there it was. Clear. Unavoidable. Him. Lily. The dance. The smirk. The way his parents reacted in the background. The way people nearby pretended not to notice. The way it wasn't subtle at all. Clips started circulating. Not maliciously at first. Just shared. Commented on. Rewatched. And then joked about. "Careful," someone apparently said at another gathering. "Don't pull an Ethan." I heard that part over coffee from a mutual friend, Megan. She stirred her drink slowly, watching my face. "It's kind of become a thing," she said carefully. "People are talking." I nodded. I figured. She hesitated. He's not handling it well. I almost asked how. Then stopped myself. Because it didn't matter. "He told people you overreacted," she added, "at first." "Of course he did. But then the video..." She trailed off. "Right. Reality has a way of interrupting narratives." "He's been arguing with his parents," she continued. "His mom's really upset. His sister too. She said he made her wedding about himself." I let that sit for a moment. Not with satisfaction, just acknowledgement. And Lily? I asked before I could stop myself. Megan gave a small, almost awkward smile. She's already seeing someone else, she said. Apparently, she told people Ethan was just convenient that night. Convenient. I leaned back slightly, exhaling. It fit. Everything about it fit. What about him? Megan asked gently. Do you miss him? The question lingered longer than I expected. Not because I didn't know the answer. Because I remembered what it felt like to have one. I miss who I thought he was, I said finally. And that was the truth. Not the man who stood on that dance floor. Not the one who told me to relax. Not the one who showed up at my door angry instead of accountable. I missed the version of him that made me feel safe at the beginning. But that version didn't exist anymore. Or maybe it never had. Over the next few weeks, my life settled into something unfamiliar. Not exciting. Not dramatic. Just calm. I went to work. Came home. Cooked for myself. Started going to the gym again. Reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while. And slowly, that constant tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying started to disappear. No second guessing. No waiting for replies. No adjusting my mood based on someone else's. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. 6 months later, I almost forgot what chaos felt like. Not completely. It still existed in fragments, memories that surfaced at inconvenient times. A song, a passing comment, a wedding invitation I almost declined before reminding myself that not every story ends the same way. But most days, it was gone. My life had settled into something steady, not the kind of steady I used to be for someone else, the kind I built for myself. Work had changed. I was promoted 2 months after everything happened. A role with more responsibility, more pressure, but also more clarity. I was good at what I did, and for once, I wasn't shrinking that part of myself to make room for someone else's ego. I started training for a marathon, not because I loved running, because I needed something that required discipline, consistency, and forward movement, something that depended entirely on me showing up for myself. And I did. Every morning, every mile. My apartment felt different too. Lighter, cleaner. Not just physically, emotionally. There was no tension sitting in the corners anymore. No conversations I was avoiding. No invisible weight attached to someone else's moods. Just space. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill it. Then, one Friday night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something, curiosity maybe, made me open the message. Hey, it's me. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I had deleted his number months ago. Still I knew. Natalie, can we talk? A minute later, another message came through. I saw you in Megan's story. You look happy. I'm glad. And then, I just wish things had gone differently. I leaned back against the couch, phone resting loosely in my hand. For a second, I considered not replying, letting the silence continue. Because silence had done more work than words ever could. But then another thought crossed my mind. Not closure. Not for him. For me. So I typed back. What do you want, Ethan? The response came almost instantly, like he had been waiting. Just closure. I've been through a lot since the wedding. Of course he had. I lost friends. My family's still distant. My sister barely talks to me. And Lily, that didn't go anywhere. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He kept going. I guess I just didn't realize what I had until it was gone. There it was. The line people reach for when consequences finally catch up. You were always good to me, Natalie. Maybe too good. I smiled faintly at that. Not because it felt good, because it sounded familiar. Like something copied from a script people use when they don't know how to say anything real. Another message came. Can we get coffee? Just talk, no pressure. I stared at the screen for a long moment. 6 months ago, that message would have meant everything. Hope, possibility, a chance to fix what felt broken. Now, it felt like an echo, something distant, disconnected from the life I was living. So I typed slowly. No need, I already have closure. There was a pause this time. Longer. Then, you really don't care anymore, do you? I read that message twice, not because I didn't understand it, because I remembered when the answer would have been different. I took a breath, then replied, You mattered. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then came back again. But I finished the thought before he could respond. You just don't anymore. This time, the silence lasted longer. Minutes. I set my phone down and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. When I came back, there was one final message waiting. I guess I deserve that. Another pause. Then, I hope there's someone else. Someone who treats you better than I did. I looked at the screen for a second, then typed. There isn't. A few seconds passed. Oh, I could almost hear the shift in his tone through that single word. Confusion. Maybe even hope. So I added one more line. There's just peace. That was the last message I sent him. He didn't reply. And for the first time, I knew he wouldn't. Not because he didn't want to, because there was nothing left to say that would change anything. A few months later, I ran into Megan again. Same coffee shop, same quiet corner table, different version of me. He moved back in with his parents, yeah, she said casually, stirring her drink. Quit his job for a while. Said he needed to reset. I nodded. His dad still won't talk about the wedding, she added. And his sister, I don't think she's forgiven him. That part didn't surprise me. Some moments don't just embarrass you. They redefine how people see you. And Lily? I asked, more out of habit than interest. Megan smiled slightly. She blocked him, she said. Apparently things got messy after. Of course they did. We sat there for a while in comfortable silence. Then she looked at me. Do you ever think about reaching out? I shook my head. Not quickly, not dismissively. Just honestly, I don't hate him, I said. And that was true. Hatred requires energy, emotion, investment. I didn't have any of that left for him. I just stopped trying to understand him. Megan nodded slowly. That's probably healthier. I smiled faintly. Or maybe I just finally learned the difference between love and tolerance. That night, walking home, I passed by a restaurant with a wedding reception inside. Music drifted through the glass doors. Laughter, clinking glasses, people dancing under warm lights. For a split second, I saw it again. That night, that moment, his hand on her waist, his voice telling me to relax. And then it faded. Not suppressed, not pushed away, just gone, like smoke dissolving into air. That's the difference between then and now. Back then, I wanted to be chosen, to be understood, to be enough. Now, I choose myself. He wanted attention. I wanted peace. And in the end, peace won.